All right. Well, today, my friends, we're going to do things a little bit different. Today, we're going to have a bit more of a conversational approach. A lot of times, I get really excited about sharing the word, and we're all over the place up here, but today, I'm going to stay seated. Today, I want to have some conversations with you because I want to talk about some places that can be really complicated, that can be really complex, but I think there's a simple solution for those challenges, for those problems. And so over the next few minutes, I'm going to just share two verses. It's really one run-on sentence. And we're going to look at some practical application, and then we're going to talk about some helps. And then at the very end of our time together today, we're doing things a little bit different. I have a couple that's going to join me here. We're going to do an interview style as we talk about the application of the topic today, okay? All right, and so in order to set things up, what I want to do is I want to invite you into a set of statistics. Now, oftentimes stats can be pulled out of thin air. What I want you to know is I didn't make these up. I looked them up. I found them on the World Health Organization. I found them from CDC. I found them from other U.S. agencies, all right? And so as we share these stats, you'll see the weightiness that will come from them. Let me give you an example with just the first one here. And so in our world, in our globe, around the world, there are 79,500,000 refugees. If you were to look at the world at large and you were to consider those who had been forcibly displaced, they'd been kicked out of their country, whether it was political unrest or some sort of human rights issues or some sort of conflict. If you look at the world today, there are over 79 million refugees. If you also look in the world, there are 792,343,581 who will go without clean drinking water around the world. As we look inside of our own country, inside of our own nation, we can find stats about homelessness, that there are over 500,000 people who experience homelessness. I couldn't find it for 2020, I found it for 2019, who experienced homelessness at least one night of the year last year. 567,000 different individuals in our backyard. Of those, 20%, or 113,000 and some change, were kids, youth, under the age of 18. If we were to look and just consider stats around women and sexuality, some 33% of women will report experiencing some sort of sexual violence, being forced, being pressed to go in a direction. 70% of inmates that are in our nation's prison cells cannot read above a fourth grade level. 16,200,000 kids will go hungry in America this year. 5,872 people died from hunger in our country in the last 24 hours. 12,507,567 abortions in the last 12 months. 314,768 suicides this year. As I was putting these numbers together, obviously they're very sobering, they're very alarming, they're very shocking kind of things, and these are a handful of examples, and to be honest with you, there were so many of them that I could have pulled out of here. As I consider numbers like this, I find ourselves in a unique situation where we have something that has never been experienced in the history of the world before, that you and I, because of where we are, because of technology, the way that we can communicate with one another, that there is a heightened awareness. That not too long ago, you were much less aware of the kind of things that I was covering this morning. It wasn't too far back in history that the only natural disasters that you were ever going to hear about were the ones that happened locally, or maybe you picked up the Sunday paper and you could read through the paper. It wasn't too long ago that the only poverty you were going to see was maybe you were driving downtown through an urban area. Maybe you saw some folks living under a bridge, but you didn't see poverty at a whole. It wasn't too long ago that the only murders that we really knew about were, the local show up on a police report or something, but for the most part, they were left to TV shows, CSI, or now some of you are a little bit older, and Things have changed. Maybe the only murders you saw were Matlock or Murder, She Wrote back in the day. See? You dated yourself. I didn't do it. See, it wasn't too long ago that we were much, much less aware, but today is different, isn't it? I mean, today we're confronted by these ideas almost everywhere that we turn. It's really hard to escape from them. You turn on the television, you turn on the radio, you get your apps out, social media, right? Notifications on your phone. And honestly, when we look at stuff like this and we consider what's going on in the world around us, it convinces us of a truth that we already know. The world's pretty jacked up. It's a broken place. Needs help, needs healing. We already know those kind of things, but honestly, when we feel the weight and the magnitude of something like that, does it not feel overwhelming? When you feel what's going on around you. And honestly, I think this is where I'm okay as long as it's just numbers. You know, when we put big numbers on the screen, I'm a numbers guy, I don't mind the numbers. You know where I get wrecked? Is when those numbers turn into faces. That's when I think about the children who are hungry, when I think about the abortions, when I can see the faces. Do you ever go beyond just the numbers and see the faces? And as if that weren't enough, this whole thing gets compounded even more because, honestly, we don't live in the global world, do we? We live in our backyards. We live with our neighbors who are around us. And that's where the issue really becomes complex. Because when you live on the other side of the planet, well, you know, what can I do anyway? But when it's in my own backyard, it becomes more and more complex. See, that neighbor that's going through that nasty divorce. Or, you know, I have that family member that's being diagnosed with cancer, or their friend who's in an intensive care unit, the kid who got wrecked in a car, lost his life. I'm thinking about real examples in the last year. Neighbor's kid is strung out on drugs again. Friend's mom is in hospice. People in my community group lost their jobs. We can go on about these examples, and honestly, it just becomes more and more overwhelming, and then becomes the tension. What do you do with all this? What do you do when you see the brokenness of the world around you, and you can feel it, you begin to personalize it, but then the weight sits on you? What do you do with it? It feels a little bit helpless and hopeless. It's a little bit frustrating. See, I think there's a natural order to our process of things like this. I think that early on, that when you hear of something, that it will stir your heart. You'll be moved towards compassion. You'll commit to actually wanting to do something about it, to wanting to be a part of the solution. And then as you get in and you see how big the thing actually is, then it starts sitting on you and you think, oh, what did I get myself into? I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can actually make a difference. I wanted to make a difference, not sure that I can. And then the dangerous thing happens, is when I keep seeing the same numbers and those numbers just get bigger, well, they stop being faces, don't they? They stop being real people. It starts being a story in some other place that doesn't really impact or bother me, because what's happening? I'm becoming desensitized. I'm becoming calloused in my heart. The thing that I hear that once broke my heart now no longer breaks my heart. That's a challenging place to live. And so I think the question, right? We ask a lot of questions of one another here in this room. I think the question that I would like to pose for you today is the same question that I find myself wrestling through. And I word it this way: how can I make a difference in a big world with big problems when everything I have to offer seems, by comparison, small and inadequate? How can I make a difference in a world that's so big with so many complications, that's so overwhelming? And as I consider what little resources or time or effort or energy or talent that I have, how can I make a difference when the problems are so big around me? I find myself frustrated when I think about things like this, because it does feel helpless. It does feel like I can't do anything. What difference can I make? I can't stop world hunger. There are kids that are going to die in Africa, and I can't do anything about it. And that's frustrating, and it breaks my heart. I can't end the world's wars that are going on. I can't stop the sex trafficking. I just read about another one up in Atlanta. I can't stop the sex trafficking. And when that happens and I can't care for every vulnerable child, I'm tempted to do something. I'm tempted to put up walls around my heart and my mind. I'm tempted to push back and to push away and to tune out. And that's what a lot of us do. And here lies the problem, the tension, is that most of us in this room are Christians. And for Christians, we don't get to just bow out. We don't get to turn a blind eye. That we are called, that we are placed, that we are indeed sent. And so if most of us here are Christians in the room, then what are we supposed to do when it feels so overwhelming, when the problems have been so big, when the world's needs are greater than my small and inadequate, seemingly, ways of helping? I don't know if it's just me or if I don't know that we all go through these kind of ideas. Do you ever feel this way? Do you ever ask questions like this? Do you ever feel like it's maybe too much and you couldn't make a difference? Today I want to take us into just a couple of verses. I want to take you to a place over in Galatians where Paul, the Apostle Paul, he's writing this letter to a group of Christians who would identify like maybe what we were identifying. That for a period of time that they wanted to be a part of solution, but they started facing some challenges. And so I want to take you into the end of this letter with these two sentences that speak about our social responsibilities. And I'll take you into Galatians chapter 6, and this is just verse 9, okay? And so let us not become weary in doing good. Let us not become weary in doing good, things that are morally good or ethically good, how we treat others, our social responsibilities, good deeds. Let us not become weary in doing these good deeds. See, earlier in this same chapter, when Paul was laying this idea out, in verse 2, he had talked about some of the good deeds. He had shared this idea of carrying one another's burdens. That's something that we talk about here in this church a lot. Carrying one another's burdens, and he says this, that you will fulfill the law of Christ. Have you ever tried to carry another person's burdens before? I'm sure you have. Everybody in here at some point in time has at least attempted to carry another person's burdens and to feel like, oh man, I've got problems of my own. And carrying another individual's burdens can feel heavy and weighted. And I think Paul knows this. This is why he starts laying into this idea. Watch what he says. Do not grow weary in doing good. Do not grow weary. That word weary. Don't grow tired. Don't grow tired. Don't become burnt out. Don't be worn out. Don't let it get to the point where you no longer have the strength to do the good that you know to do. Why would Paul be talking like this if it were not something that we would all struggle with? Why would be Paul talking like this? I think it's because Paul himself understood what it was like to carry burdens or to go to places that weren't of his own doing. And Paul speaks to us and he says, don't give up. Don't quit. Don't become weary in doing good. He knows that you can grow tired. And as a Christian, let's just be honest, let's just have real conversations that when we're carrying one another's burdens, you can grow weary when you're constantly being asked to put another person's needs above your own. These are some of the challenges that the gospel will call us to, and yet we can end up in places where we're burnt out, where maybe you're being asked to give, or you're being tired of being the one who's always the one to forgive or turn the other cheek. Sometimes we get tired of serving others or caring for others or just tired of struggling to try to do the right thing. Sometimes when we get tired, I tell my family all the time, like, listen, if I don't go to bed right now, everything after this is going to be sin because I'm so tired that what comes out of my mouth or my actions, when we become weary, when we become so exhausted, then we find ourselves in a place where we can't do the good that the Lord has called us to. And Paul speaks to just that. And he says, don't give up. I like that. He says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at a proper time we will reap a harvest. And this is the idea, at the proper time. There are seasons where we go into things and we think because I'm doing the good work or I'm doing the thing that God has spoken to me, I'm doing the right thing, we want the results immediately then and there. But at the proper time, Paul would say, that there would be a reward, that there would be a harvest if, and it's conditional, that if we would not give up. And I think this is applicable to us. I think it's applicable certainly to those in Galatia, that when we're tempted to give up, when we're tempted to be weary, when we're tempted to throw in the towel, there's a proper time. There's a harvest that's coming. And in verse 10, the second of the two verses that we'll look at, he says this. He says, therefore, as we have opportunity, and that word opportunity is kairos. It's the word time. Therefore, as we have time. When we look at our lives and we consider the opportunity, when we consider the time, we have full schedules. Your calendars are full. You have things that you have to do that are your responsibilities at work and in your home, things that you have to do for your own family, for your loved ones, things that we do in our church and in our ministries. Paul is really aware of these kind of things, and he's using this language of when you have kairos, when you have time, when you have opportunity, that we should be mindful of the spaces and the opportunities that are afforded to us. Yes, there's going to be problems in the world. There are things that we cannot fix. But as a Christian, it's our responsibility to do the good that the Lord has put in front of us. But yet it becomes overwhelming, it's daunting, and Paul would remind us, as you have the opportunity to do this good. And therein lies the tension, and this is where I want to bring some resolution, this is where I want to offer some helps, and this is where I want us to kind of move for a framework of our conversation for today. A little while back, I was reading, this was a few years ago, and I read this quote that really helped me a lot, and it was by Andy Stanley, and it says this, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Can we say that together on three? 1, 2, 3. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. And this helps me so much because when I look at the whole, when I look at it at large, when I see these big inflated numbers, I feel as if there is nothing that I can do that is going to help. But when I start doing for one what I wish I could do for everyone. Man, is that not the game changer? You see, something happens because we've been taught this little idea that gets combated when we think this way. That somewhere along the way that we were taught that, life is supposed to be fair. Maybe there was this approach, whether it was your parents or a school teacher, like, if I do this for you, then I have to do this for everyone. There's this idea of maybe it was a parent, if I do this for your sibling, if I let you do this, then I've got to let your brother do this, and I can't let your brother do this, so you can't do it either. Or maybe it was something as a teacher, you wanted to ask for permission or do something. This happened to me all the time in school. And my wife, she was a few years ago when we lived in South Florida, she was working through some special circumstances with her job, and literally, her boss, the HR department, used this same line. If I do this for you, I'd have to do it for everyone. We can't do it for everyone, right? Since I can't do it for everyone, I won't do it for anyone. Whenever this was used, and I heard this as a kid, I always thought that's absolutely ridiculous. The idea that you can't do for me because you'd have to do for, I'm not going to tell anybody. Let's just, you can do this. Life does not have to be fair. Life isn't fair. And so as we begin to look through places of how can we help as the whole, that we could do for one what we wish we could do for everyone. Now here's the second question that I want to give you for today. Who is your one? And I think this is important for us to begin to narrow down, to prayerfully consider, to ask God, who is my one? God, I can't do for everybody. I wish I could be a part of the solution, but God, there are certain individuals, this one individual, this place, I can help in this way. Who's my one? Who is God leading you to? Who has God brought into your life? Who is he looking for you to influence or to shape or to speak into? Who's your one? As you ask questions like this, as you begin to talk to the Lord, I think he's going to drop names or faces or images on your heart. I think he's going to bring people into your life that are your one. Let me give you some examples. Maybe as you ask God this question, who's my one, then he's going to He's going to show you maybe a single mom. Maybe you can kind of see what the single mom is doing to try to make ends meet, to keep her kids fed. And maybe for you, I can just offer to watch their children. Just free babysitting. I can come and help you in this. Maybe for you, that as you ask the question, that God is going to come along and show you a single mom who's your one. Or maybe for you, you're going to see a struggling family. They're going through some conflicts. They're having a hard time. And God is going to position you to come up alongside them. Maybe there's a group of kids, and your heart is for the fatherless and those without their dads around. Maybe for you, God is going to bring you can't fix the fatherless thing that plagues our whole culture, but maybe you can show up at some Little League games. Maybe you can start to mentor a little bit. Maybe you can step into a role. No, you're not their dad, but you can step into a role that should have been filled. Maybe as you ask these questions, and God's going to send you one couple, one marriage that's struggling, and you think to yourself, I can't help them. My marriage has struggled. I have issues. We haven't fixed it all. See, sometimes we think we have to be perfect to be a part of a solution. But maybe, just maybe, God has allowed you to go through some difficulties and circumstances inside of your marriage, and now as you get up alongside them, He's going to use you to speak into the one. Now, I can't do it for everyone, but I can do it for one. Maybe it's a place of financial hardship. Maybe it's another family. They're going through a hard time, and they lost their job, or they were laid off, and the financial resources aren't there like maybe they were before. You're kind of strapped too. But maybe, just maybe, you can't do this for everybody, but you could find a way. You can sell some things. You could come alongside and support. Can't do this for everybody, but man, God is leading me to do this for you. God's going to nudge you as you ask these questions. I want to encourage you. And as He does, to listen and to go all in on that one. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. As I thought about this idea, I wanted to look at some practical ways of how do we do for one? How can we do this in the most practical way? And I just want to give you a few tips, and then we're going to bring this piece together here as we are going to do for one today. So the first tip that I would give you would be to go deep versus wide. See, if you're like me, you have a desire inside of your heart, I want to help as many people as I possibly can. But what happens is that we end up spreading ourselves too thin. So a little bit goes to a lot of people and makes minimal impact. We spread ourselves out. The intention is good. The desire is good. I want to help as many people as I can. But what I would encourage you to do is to go deep versus wide. To go all in. To go as deep as you can with that one individual. Instead of just passing it a little bit out, you're giving a lot towards certain individuals. And so maybe it's for you a heart for the poor. Instead of just taking your resources and putting $1 here, $5 here, $10 there, what would it look like for you to actually see the homeless guy who is your one and be like, bro, I don't know why, and I can't do this for everybody, but you're on my heart, and I'm going to come alongside you, and we're going to go deep. I'm going to be there in relationship with you. I'm going to show up consistently. What would it look like to go deep rather than just wide? Or maybe for you, you have a passion for the next generation. Oh, I love the youth. I love the age group. But maybe you need to go deep, and you need to start helping with our students group around here, our youth group around here, or some of the youth that are in boys and girls clubs, wherever the organization is. When something is in your heart, instead of spreading out, go deep versus wide. The second one is this, is to go long-term versus short-term. Long-term versus short-term. And this is one of the places where, as Paul was talking about when he said, at a proper time, you will reap a harvest. Long-term versus short-term. We want immediate results. And when they don't happen, as I said earlier, we become frustrated, and sometimes we just bow out. But what would it look like? Just think hypothetically here. What would it look like for that same couple who's struggling inside of their marriage? Instead of you one time, hey, guys, Let me just, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can go on your way. Or instead of me sending you out to a counselor or whatever that might be. Instead of that, what if you invested once a month for 2 years, bringing you over to dinner, shaping, mentoring, and speaking into? What would it look like to go long-term versus short-term? And then as we talk about places, the third one that I would say is to give time and money. To give time and money. And the reason I say time and money is because oftentimes, we can throw money at stuff. Money is not your most precious commodity. It is your time. And there are places where we would rather throw money at than show up for. And what the person needs is your time. And your money sometimes. Time and money. See, it's easier to just give of the money and not of the time. But the real life change happens. And think about this for a minute. And these things, right? So go deep versus wide, long versus short, money versus time. Think about the people in your life that have impacted you the most. And think about those three things. Did they do this? Chances are they went pretty deep with you, didn't they? Chances are it was a longer term rather than a short term. And the chances are that they invested time and money into the relationships with you. And you were shaped as a result of them. And so when we live in a big world with big problems and big challenges, and we're tempted to think, I can't make a difference, there's nothing that I can do. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. Ask God the question, who is my one? Now, let me pose it this way. Imagine if we really did this. Imagine if each one reached one. Imagine if each person in this room genuinely had a 1 or a 2. What difference could you make in the community around us? Imagine if we all did this. I believe this is how we change the world. We talk about grandiose ideas. Go and change your world. I believe we do it one person at a time. I'm convinced that maybe if it doesn't change the whole world, it'll change somebody's world. It changes the world of the one, doesn't it? I'm also convinced it doesn't just change the world of the one, it changes your world too. That when God does something through us in the life of another individual, you can't help but be shaped by it, to be changed by it. We were talking this week. God sent you the one. And how it changes you, how it shapes you, how it encourages you. Who is your one? Who has God brought to you? Go all in. Go all out. Blow their socks off. Show up. Show out. Invest. Give. Love. Serve. Carry one another's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at a proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Verse 10, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. You notice he's talking about taking care of the house first, right? Let me ask you a few more questions. We're going to bring this together here. Then we're going to move in a little bit different direction. Let me ask you a few questions here. Are you the one? See, we've all been the one at some point in time. You know what I mean, the one. The person on the receiving end. The person who has come in carrying things you need to meet with God. You need something. You're the one. And every one of us were the one at some point in time. And what I love about the heart of our God is that he is all about the one. There's a great place in Scripture that talks about a group of believers. There's 100 of them, and 99 of them are okay, but one is not. And Jesus is about that one. He goes after that one. I was that one. You're sitting next to a bunch of ones. Maybe you're the one today. Listen, we're a church that is about the one, serving a God who is for the one. If you find yourself in need today and you're like, yeah, that's me. I'm the one. I came here today because, God, I'm desperate for you. Well, then you're in a great place because God is here to meet with you. If you're not the one, let me ask a second question. As you consider everything that's going on in the world today, does it become too daunting? Does it become overwhelming? Are you overwhelmed? I get it. When we find ourselves in a place where the burden sits on us, I just want to remind you, I'm reminding myself of the role I sit in, that when we take the burden and we're trying to carry that burden, it's really the Lord's burden to carry. I'm coming alongside you. I'm standing in the gap. You're standing in the gap with me. We do this for one another and with one another. But as we do that, it gets really heavy sometimes, and we can become overwhelmed. The Lord, in this moment, I just want to remind you that He offers you strength and courage and peace, that He sees where you are. He sees the weight of what you've been carrying. Let me ask another question. Have you become weary? Are you tired? Do you feel like giving up? You sometimes feel like quitting? Do you ever feel like you know the good that you're to do and just don't know if you could do it anymore? Paul would say, don't grow weary. Don't give up. For at the proper time, you will reap a harvest. Let me ask you this last question. Have you become calloused? The things that are going on that used to bother you. You see them on the news, first shootings, the first whatever, wrecks your heart, but now it's commonplace. That's just the kind of thing that happens in the world around us. When we become calloused, we're no longer seeing as the Lord sees. We're no longer experiencing as the Lord experiences. Our heart is not where the heart of the Lord is. The Lord's heart continues to break for those things that sometimes we even become callous to. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just pray. And if you're the one, I'm praying for you. If you're overwhelmed, I'm praying for you. If you're weary, we're praying. If you're calloused, we're praying. And I don't think that exempts any of us. I think we're all in some way in one of these places, right? Could we pray, genuinely pray, and ask the Lord to help us as we move forward with the good work that He has put in front of us? Heavenly Father, today we gather together in the Father's house, and what a great day of celebration. Thank you, Lord, for being here with us and meeting us here. Today, God, we're talking about a simple concept, 2 simple verses, but have profound implications on our lives. God, some of us in the room or watching online are the one. God, we came today with a burden, some heaviness, something that we're carrying. We need to be ministered to. God, would you do what only you can do in this moment? And would you extend your hand of grace? Would you love on those who are the one who need to be loved on today? Would you bring healing? Would you provide? God, would you meet the needs? Father, I also pray for those who are feeling overwhelmed, where the weight of the world, of the responsibilities, the things that they are shouldering, when it feels too much, when they feel like maybe they can't carry it any longer. Would you remind them that it is you who are there with them, that you are their strength? Give them courage to carry on, to continue to do the good work. And Father, those that are carrying those burdens, would you allow them to see that harvest, to see the fruit in their lives? Father, I also pray for those who have grown weary, who have grown tired, who feel defeated. Renew their strength, God. Lord, I pray for those who have become calloused in their hearts. I pray for the calloused areas of all of us. God, the areas where we should be sensitive, but we're not anymore. Areas where you're speaking, but we're not hearing. Areas where you're showing us, but we're not looking. God, in areas where we cover our eyes, and we plug our ears, and we cover our mouth. God, forgive us for the places that we become callous.
Help us to see as you see. Help us to love as you love. Father, will you help us do for one what we wish we could do for everyone? Will you help us identify our one? Will you help us to go all in with them? Help us to serve them well. In Jesus' name.